All right, let's jump into this first story from The Hill. Ukraine capital preparing evacuation centers for possible nuclear strike. They're also handing out potassium iodide. Poland's been doing the same thing. And the other big news here is that Poland suggests hosting U.S. nuclear weapons amid growing fears of Putin's threats. So, look, all of this. You know, when I see Ukraine and they're giving out potassium iodide, these are the tablets you take to try and protect your thyroid when there's radioactive particles everywhere, and they're prepping evacuation centers. I don't trust Ukraine. Look, I don't like that Russia invaded them. I don't like that Russia is annexing these regions. I don't like any of that stuff. I don't like what they do with Crimea. But I think Ukraine is desperate. So they're going to say whatever they need to say to make it seem like the end is nigh and we need to keep giving them money. And they just announced, what, another like $600 million, 625 or some ridiculous number. So when Ukraine's like, oh, you prepare for a nuclear strike, are they doing that to freak us out to get the headline? Or are they actually concerned it's going to happen? That being said, when Poland suggests hosting U.S. nuclear weapons, which is basically spitting in the face of Putin, who said, do not move nukes into Eastern Europe, maybe it's not so much that they're watching in Ukraine. They're watching Putin do something, although that train carrying like the nuclear MOD group, whatever it was called, they are seeing that. But maybe the reason Ukraine is prepping for a nuclear strike is because they know what NATO is doing. And they know what NATO is doing will result in a response from Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest here. If you're not worried, you're not paying attention to what's going on here. There's been severe escalations on both sides. This is heading down a trajectory of just further dangerous pathways that, of course, don't have any diplomacies, don't have any detente, don't have any compromises. The only reason why the world wasn't blown up during the Cold War is because people negotiated. People came to the negotiation table and said, okay, let's figure this out. Let's make sure we compromise on a deal that benefits both of us so we could both get away from killing each other and extinguishing and destroying the entire world. We're not having any of that. The president of Ukraine literally just signed into law a decree that prevents him from even negotiating with Vladimir Putin and having a peace deal with him. That to me is absolutely absurd, and it is crazy.
Yeah, they framed Kennedy as having just strongman, who was the Russian premier at the time. It was Khrushchev, to take the nukes out of Cuba, and Khrushchev did it. But that's not what happened. Kennedy used diplomacy, and he worked with Khrushchev and said, we'll take our nukes out of Turkey if you take your nukes out of Cuba. It was a diplomatic action. And without diplomacy, we're not going to see the nukes. We're not going to see de-escalation. This is Will Chamberlain brought this up.
Well, you're really specifically talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis, where not many people know this, and people didn't know this when it was happening. But as you mentioned, JFK compromised with Khrushchev, and JFK agreed to get rid of the missiles that were located in Italy and in Turkey that Russia thought was going to be used against them. And therefore, the Russians were then only willing to compromise and get rid of their missiles from Cuba, which of course threatened the United States. So that was a compromise.
But hold on, how could JFK have done that? Surely the information on where those nukes were classified, and he wouldn't have the authority to declassify any of information like that, right? Some greater authority than the president. I mean, that right? Am I wrong?
I guess it turns out the president can declassify whatever.
I guess the 1960s were different than 2022.
Well, the whole thing with Trump and the classified documents just shows maybe the country has been subjugated. If the president is now being attacked because he had classified documents when previously we had a president who revealed the location of our nuclear weapons directly to our principal adversary, and that was a good thing. Now Trump can't even have documents that were empty folders, apparently. It just goes to show that the presidency is subjugated by something. Yeah.
Well, you were saying earlier, Jason, that you think there's some sort of authoritarian aspect here. I just got a tweet from disclosed.tv that the U.S. is to buy, quote, nuclear emergency drugs for $290 million from a pharmaceutical company. What is this called? Amgen is the name of the company. It's called N-Plate is the Health and Human Services drug. 125 micrograms is around $1,200. So don't discount the pharmaceutical company's attempt to profit off of a nuclear scare.
Oh, man. Look, potassium iodide is just like, it's cheap. It's nothing. It's potassium. It's iodine. You can get iodine from your table salt. You get that, you got what is it, like iodine salt or whatever, the little Morton girl with the umbrella or whatever. That works too. The point of these pills is that it satiates your thyroid. It gives you all the iodine you need so you don't absorb the particles. But I'm saying I would not be surprised if these companies come up with some way to make something slightly different. You know what they add? They'll add a little aspirin to it and be like, it'll protect you from radiation and cure a headache, and it costs $1,000.
That's exactly what they're doing. This is from healthandhumanservices.gov. HHS purchases drug for use in radiological and nuclear emergencies, and they're going right to a private pharmaceutical company.
Does it say what the drug is?
Yeah, I think I just mentioned it as an Nplate, Nplate.
I'd have to look into what that does.
Sure, it's a subcutaneous powder for injection, according to Disclosed TV. But then they link us over to Health and Human Services, where they're getting the information.
Well, I don't know, man. But do you guys even think it's going to get to that point? I kind of feel like everything we've seen so far is indicative of escalation.
Let me just say this. The rhetoric is very dangerous, right? So we could go back a few months ago where you had the head of the Russian space division saying they could nuke all NATO nations within 30 minutes. Not great. I'm not very happy about that. That's something that was put out there. You have David Petraeus this week on CNN discussing if the Russians were to use a nuclear strike, that we would basically be able to use our military to take out their entire seaboard. And it's like not even
the Black Sea Fleet specifically.
Yes,
he mentioned
exactly. How horrible that would be. So the language that's being used, the things that are being portrayed to the public, you talked about the iodine thing. Well, how about that New York City emergency PSA, where they're just talking about a random nuclear weapon going off in the city and what you do. We don't know why, we don't know how, it's not important. We've never talked like this, at least not since the 80s.
You were saying the U.S. did buy these drugs?
Yeah, they're ordering it right now as part of a long-standing ongoing effort. What's this?
So
you should check this out. It's if you want to look it up, it's ASPR.
ASPR.
But if you look up
what's the website? Or what's the title? I can Google it.
HHS purchases drug for use in radiological and nuclear emergencies.
What do we got? Is that from Bloomberg?
No, it's from HHS.gov.
Whoa. Yo, HHS buying $290 million worth of Amgen drug Nplate for radiation sickness in nuclear emergency.
Wonder if that's tax money being spent.
Well,
obviously.
Yeah. Where's it coming from?
It's called theft, Ian.
So, look, here's what I want to say. Sometimes they tell you exactly what they're doing and what's coming. I mean, if they're doing this, they're not keeping it a secret from us that they think we're going to nuclear war.
No, it's dangerous. And it's not just Petraeus. It seems like everybody who supposedly is an authoritative source on this in our military and on the media is saying that tactical nuclear strikes might be okay. This is insane. You know
what really, really pisses me off right now is that this company that's selling this drug didn't call it Radaway.
Yeah, really?
Yeah,
they're missing the market.
Maybe they would have gotten sued by Bethesda.
Shout out to Fallout. This is saying that
let's call it Radaway.
The Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority in 2004 got some new authority called Project BioShield Act and can now, I don't know, spend indiscriminately. I don't know what it can do with this Project BioShield Act signed in 2004. Sounds like a Bush thing. Probably afraid of, there was all this weapons of mass destruction fear. So they're like, we got to sign new authoritarian laws to give us overarching authority to do whatever we want.
So this is a treatment for acute radiation sickness due to a radiological or nuclear emergency. And it is approved for immune thrombocytopenia, a blood disorder characterized by a low platelet count. By low platelet counts, plural. So, maybe they're just like, here's an opportunity to give money to the pharmaceutical companies. Or maybe they're like, there's going to be a nuclear war. Putin's going to do it.
Here's the thing. Let's say a nuclear bomb goes off anywhere in the world. We live in such a post-truth world that how do you attribute that to anybody? Because you know who the media is going to say.
Oh, dude, look at Nord Stream.
Exactly.
Yeah, not only that, but the United States also on record lost nuclear weapons that they can't account for. And guess what? The Russians lost a lot more of them as well, especially when the Soviet Union collapsed. Literally, people walked into military facilities and was like, yeah, I'll give you 1,000 rubles for that. And they're like, yeah, here's your nuclear weapon. So there's a lot of nuclear weapons that are out there that we can't account for, that we don't know where they are. They could be in private hands. They could be in very sinister hands. They could be in third parties that could profit off of escalating this conflict. And as we talked about before, maybe it's not even the United States responsible for this gas explosion. Maybe it's a private industrial complex company, organization, party, or even third party like China that's sitting back and saying, well, maybe we could watch these two countries fight each other and then grow in the absence of them obliterating each other.
What if there was like a former special agent from like the UK, was like MI6, is that what it's called?
MI6, yeah.
And then And what he did was he got a bunch of other special agents to come work for him and was like a rogue nation.
Well, we got to understand, we're living in a place where multinational corporations have a lot more power and influence than governments. We have to understand, Biden right here is not making any decisions. He's not calling the shots here. He is someone that is not of sound mind. He can't make coherent sentences. There's no way he could be handling the most stressful job as described by many presidents of the United States to be in that Oval Office. There's no way he is working nonstop. There's no way he's cutting deals, negotiating behind the closed doors. There's someone else calling the shots here. Who is that person? Well, I think it's the people benefiting off of a lot of his failed policies that destroy the American lower and middle class and, of course, prop up the billionaires, the bankers, and, of course, the private interests that I think are truly calling the shots here, who are, psychopathic, who will do anything to get money, to get power, to get influence. And I think a lot of them are even satanic. But that's a whole different perspective. I don't even want to go down there.
The issue is, don't think about it in terms of the NATO versus Russia. Think about it in terms of something you believe is right and something you see someone doing that you believe is wrong. And then think about your willingness to allow them to keep doing it to prevent a fight. Think about a child drag show. Most people probably do not want to see those things. But when we have people going out and protesting, fights happen. So this is the problem. We don't want the fighting. But I want, you'll understand the perspective of what NATO and what Russia are both feeling. They're both saying, we will not stop. They're both saying, if you want to avoid war, you back down. And they're both saying that exactly to each other because they both think they're right. I don't think, for the most part, a lot of these NATO countries, I think a lot of the people in these countries think they're legitimately correct and right. I think they're evil, a lot of them. I think their attitude is elitist and the people are stupid and we're better than them, but we're doing the right thing and they should be grateful. And I think Putin's probably the exact same way, but just not aligned with them. And so they're adamant that they are deserving of their quest towards their ideology, and no one is going to back down. There's no scenario I see Vladimir Putin being like, well, NATO's expanding on my border. Meh, whatever. Russia can just roll over. No way. Dude's going to be like, I want to bring back the Soviet Union. It was a travesty that it fell. I mean, he literally said this. And he says it's a travesty that it collapsed and our leaders let us down. This is not a guy who's going to be like, it's a good thing that Western forces are taking over our country.
He thinks it's a horrible thing. Konstantin Kisin translated his speech, which everyone should check out on Twitter. It's a long thread. And Putin was essentially intimating that the liberal economic order has gone too far. It's destroying Earth. It's creating, it's satanic. I think he even said at one point, and it's falling, and he's going to make sure that it falls.
Like he said, the Satanism thing in line with the gender ideology that's going to be pushed. And I actually watched Leninov at the UN in the previous week, and it was hard for me to I'm no Russophile, right? I agree with you, Tim, that Putin's not a great guy. He's got his mindset. He has authoritarianism. But when you have Leninov sitting there talking about the war on terror, what we did in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, and beyond, it's hard to argue with the guy. What freedom did we bring? Are these nation states better off after our intervention, or are they worse off? Well, I think by any measure of the imagination, most of these places have become even more failed states. They have slavery in Libya, for God's sakes. I mean, it's 2022. And would that have happened without U.S. military intervention? I doubt it. So it's tough because their rhetoric sounds pretty good right now. But then you have people biting on that line that somehow, Putin's the good guy and he's fighting these people. I think that they're all fighting for their vision of what globalism is going to become in the next century.
And all any regular person wants is to go into their yard, throw some feed to their chickens, collect some eggs, bring breakfast to their family, and then mind their own business. But unfortunately, there are ideologues and there are zealots who are hell-bent on controlling your life, and some of them amass tons of power. Then they want to blow up kids, take over your country, and take away your chickens.
And they amass nuclear weapons, which endanger the entire world. And as Burma's pointed out, it's something that I've been saying from the very beginning of this conflict. Everyone's looking out for themselves. Putin is looking out for Putin. He's looking out also for his country, his interests. The United States is looking out for their interests. and there's no denying it, especially with the moves that have been made here. But when do we make a stop? When do we try to pause this insanity that has led us to this situation where young men and innocent human beings are dying for the political ambitions of politicians? That to me is absurd.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.